Let's take a closer look at the successor of the Lamborghini Aventador, the new Revuelto. To understand this car, we have to put ourselves in the shoes of a Lamborghini engineer. You have the successful and very popular Aventador, which is the fourth generation of Lamborghini's iconic V12 mid-engine sports cars. Special about the package is that the gearbox sits in front of the V12 engine between the passengers. And by the way, that was also the role model for the Bugatti Veyron package. Advantage of this concept is that there is only the rear differential behind the engine, so there can be a larger diffuser and more downforce from the floor. A long, low-hanging gearbox, like on other mid-engine cars, wouldn't allow this. Another factor is that the gearbox is pretty much in the middle of the car, so the inertia around the vertical axis is low, and there is enough space for a long V12 behind the cockpit. Also special about the Lamborghini package is that the main cooling is in the back, causing large upper air intakes and huge outlets at the back. So with this concept, the torque of the engine goes to the front, goes through the gearbox, and gets sent back via the shaft parallel to the engine, to the rear differential. Because the gearbox sits in the middle already, it's a short way to the front axle, and so Lamborghini built the Diablo VT with all-wheel drive from 1993. So you sit there now in your design office and you have this concept in front of you. People like the car, people want extreme design, and especially now with the upcoming anti-combustion engine policies, large V12s become more and more popular. But at the same time, the task is to massively reduce fuel consumption, at least at the dyno in the mandatory cycle. Also, electric drive is now trendy and customers want to be able to pull away silently in some situations. So it's clear to Lamborghini that their V12 top model can only survive if it becomes a hybrid. But with this packaging concept, how do you do that? At the same time, the car is very popular and you want to keep as many things the same, which also saves money and that brings you better profits later on. First of all, they took the same monocoque and updated it. So the only real design surface is the roof, which is now different, but A and B pillars and the middle part stayed the same. The lower part is now made with forged carbon, which are basically short carbon fibers flooded with resin. So the directions of the fibers are random and it's a lot heavier than weaved carbon fiber parts. But it's still lighter than metal and looks interesting. The VW group has been playing with this material for years and now they use it for the lower part of the monocoque and replace the aluminium front frame with forged carbon as well. That allowed them to get higher torsional stiffness and they could slim down the super wide Lamborghini sills. Another point customers complained about in the past. And it's 10% lighter. So since the monocoque dimensions stayed the same, also the gap between the passengers stayed the same. Now, the first big question when designing a hybrid car is, where do you put the battery? It's a large and heavy part, so you want it in the center of the car, but where is the gearbox? So Lamborghini removed the gearbox from the tunnel, turned the drivetrain 180 degrees, and now the tunnel was free for a battery. They put in a 155 cm long battery, which is 30 cm high and 24 cm wide. It weighs 79 kg and has 3.8 kWh capacity. But the gearbox now sits behind the engine, so exactly this low-hanging large part which the previous concept avoided. And to prevent a longer wheelbase and the gearbox sticking out, Lamborghini decided to use a transversal gearbox behind the longitudinal engine, like a Carrera GT. So Lambo could reach a weight distribution of 44 to 56. The Aventador had a very slim ISR gearbox. That stands for Independent Shifting Rod. And it means instead of using the same fork for changing from gear 2 to 3, this gearbox has 4 forks. So one takes the second gear out, the other one is putting the third gear in. And because of that, the Aventador could reach 50 milliseconds shifting time, which was a violent experience. Customers then complained about rough shifting at low speeds and clutch overheating in city traffic. They said the gearbox feels outdated and where other cars with dual clutch gearboxes can do this better. And so Lamborghini changed from a 70 kg two-shaft gearbox to a 193 three-shaft dual-clutch gearbox, but that's the weight with electric motor on top. So you have your monocoque with V12 in the same position and a compact but heavy gearbox in the back. But where do you put the electric motors? They wanted to keep the all-wheel drive, so at least one electric motor should be at the front. But if you put two electric motors there, one for each front wheel, you can do torque vectoring, which is a massive gain for vehicle dynamics. At the same time, you can do a lot of recuperations and the car can drive with front-wheel drive in electric mode, which is good for efficiency. Like we said, there is an additional electric motor on the gearbox at the rear. This one can support and also drive the rear axle electrically. Since it's spinning with gearbox speed, it can also work as the generator. And because it can also be connected to the engine, it can work as a starter as well. So the engine doesn't need generator and starter anymore, and Lamborghini can say that the engine is now 17 kg lighter than before, which is good for marketing. Also, because Lamborghini is still a small production manufacturer, they only need to fulfill the Euro 7 emission class from 2030, which means even the new model can still run without direct injection, which again keeps the costs low. The engine can now rev up to 9,500 RPM, where the maximum power of 825 horsepower is at 9,250 RPM, so just before the limiter. And the maximum torque sits at 6,750 RPM, so it's a typical power curve of a naturally aspirated engine. One of the big design features of the Aventador was its pushrod suspension at front and rear. Because of the new drivetrain with large front electric motors and charger on top and large gearbox at the back with electric motor on top, there was no space to keep the pushrod suspension anymore, and instead Lamborghini went back to a conventional suspension. This also required some changes to the rear aluminium frame. It now has casted aluminium damper mountings, which increases stiffness and weight. With this car being a hybrid now, it also means that it has an additional low-temperature water circuit, which needs additional cooling. So they asked the design department to come up with something that uses the same monocoque in the visible area and large enough cooling inlets. So the front has large inlets underneath, and because of the black high-gloss finish, they can also hide the radar there. Because of the tight packaging in front, there is still space for a front trunk, and there is a plug to recharge the car with 7 kW. Suppliers usually have a small 7 kW and a large 11 kW charger in stock. Because the battery has only 3.8 kWh capacity, it should take around half an hour to fully recharge. The cooling inlets at the back are very important for Lamborghini, as we learned before, and so it seems like another designer decision to use a sharp angled sideline again, which would disturb the downwashing flow to the side intakes. The blades behind the front wheels can help to push the front rear wake a bit further out, so the side intakes get cleaner air. Interesting is the large blade above, which is now open at the back and channeling air towards the large intakes on top. This gives you a cleaner side line, but still good cooling with these hidden inlets, and potentially a better flow to the rear wing. There is an active rear wing, but we will have to see how it looks like when it's out and if it deserves the name wing. At the back we can see that the center of the diffuser is lower and there are big strakes at the sides. There are the traditional outlets areas underneath the rear lights, but they are much smaller and they change to larger center outlets around the exhaust and behind the license plate. So, all in all, the new generation of the new mid-engined Lamborghini V12 is a logic evolution of their concept. It's great that they kept their V12 and built a hybrid drivetrain around it with the same monocoque concept. The fact that the new generation is around 200 kg heavier isn't ideal, but we still have a naturally aspirated V12 supercar from Lamborghini. The design of this base model is extremer than the Aventador, and its new drivetrain allows Lamborghini to enter the future and to massively reduce their fleet emissions. So, how do you like the new Lamborghini Revuelto? Let me know in the comments below and see you at the next video.